There we go. Good morning. Something looks a little different today. Zoom in. I don't know. It's interesting. Anyway, listening to some Elvis, how great they all are on the Elvis channel. Good morning. This is Suburban Prepper. I'm doing my morning drive. I was taking a shower this morning, okay? And I was thinking about how the gun range that I haven't been to yet now has a 1,400 yard range, or is it meter? I'm not sure. That I can take my 50 cal to. Okay. I got to set up a reservation time. Only problem is it's for me a 4 or 5 hour drive, and it's well worth it. I'm paying membership for this thing, and I haven't even been yet. But I've been busy zeroing my other lower caliber rifles. Which, when I was taking my shower, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about on the radio show? Whatever it's called today. And I keep going back to fun. Duh. I love when I make them stop on intersections because I reach them first. Anyway, fundamentals. Zeroing your rifle. There's so much bullshit about the best way to zero a rifle over the decades. Initially, when I was in the military, we zeroed it the way they said to zero it. There was a piece of paper, I believe it was 25 meters, and wherever you shot, that shot group told you, in the hole told you how many times you have to go up or how many times you have to go to the right or the left. I understand that's shooting it in a prone position, unsupported or supported, either way, without a tripod or a bipod or not on a bench, but an actual using your hand, your non-dominant shooting hand as a support to hold the rifle while you shoot it. Okay. Now, that obviously was just with iron sights. Shooting with a scope is a whole different ball game. But I think you need to have it zero for both. Here's why. Because if you have an iron sight on your scope or on your rifle, what's the sense of having it on if you're not going to zero it or aim it or shoot it? Okay? For some reason, I've got the zoom differently set today. I don't understand that. That's okay. Now, for me, we're going to talk about iron sight zeroing. You got to have the good sight picture. If you don't have a good sight picture, then you're going to be way off. And you got to be able to maintain that sight picture. And every time you take a shot, it's the same sight picture. Okay. Next is your breathing. You want to release the trigger, or you want to pull the trigger, I should say, right as you exhale. That time you exhale before you breathe in. Boom. To do otherwise alters your shooting patterns. You got to have a clear mind. You have to be alert, awake, and relaxed. And being hyped up on coffee or caffeinated, excessive amounts of caffeination just makes your heart gibbery and not great for zeroing. So it's a very chilled, relaxed, Zen type of moment. Then you got to have body connection, okay? Body connection. You got to become, that rifle's got to become part of your body. How are we going to do that? Well, that sling. Wrap your hand, your non-dominant hand around the sling. That's part, and hold it. And have it rest. That's part of what the sling does. Make sure the butt of that rifle is right here in the shoulder. Okay? Not dangling out. Nice and hard. When you practice that, then you take your shot. I remember when I was in the military, I really didn't know how the hell to zero. I knew the fundamentals, but I didn't really implement them much. My shot crews were all over the fucking place. And I would get them together. And it took about 5-6 times. But it's a process in the military. They have all day, really. We would zero one day and then qualify the next day. Sometimes when I was in my National Guard unit, because of we'd only have one day at the range, we'd have to zero that day and qualify that day. So here's the thing, folks. It has to be repeatable. So if you get a good zero one time, the 5 meters, M16 or A4, whatever you want to call it, that shot group should be like this. Really, should be right on top of each other. If it can be repeated, but doesn't get a good zero, zeroing it on a bench with the rifle tied down like it's a piece of artillery, and all you're doing is pushing the trigger. That's not how you zero a rifle. So, listen up, folks. This is the important part. You have to write down what the settings are on that zero, as far as the front sight and the rear sight. So that sight gets messed up. You know where it's set at. You have to be able to repeat that. I honestly, in the military, I never wrote it down. And it's set from level, okay? But you can go down or you can go up. You can go far to the left, far to the right. If you know what I'm saying. The front sight has the little thing like this, and the rear sight has the little aperture that you look through. When in the old M16, M4 style, they had a small little aperture and a large one. And for some reason, people back in the day, they would say zero through the large aperture, but shoot through the small aperture. And it turned out to be complete, utter bullshit. You zero through that small aperture at the same time. You're better off doing it like that. Now, the sights that I have now are 45-degree angle mounted sights on a couple of my rifles. And they're big sights. I mean, they're bigger than usual because vision changes, folks. You could spend a couple hours zeroing a rifle and there'd be no shame in doing it. Okay. You want to get your zero. You want to relax a little bit. You want to get that zero again, and you want to relax. Now, what's hard to do is do it when I make videos how I just get a fundamental zero by aiming the scope and aiming the barrel at the same object and dialing in the scope to see what it looks like through the barrel. There's a little bit of play because you can still, it's hard to look at the angle at an angle with a barrel because it's so straight. But there's still going to be a lot of play there. But at least it'll get you technically on paper, depending on how far out that object is and the size of the object. And that's a good way to, but you can't do that with it's going to be real hard to do that with a iron sight. Because one, you don't have the magnification that you can offset it. And two, generally, I guess you could just look to see if you're even on paper when you're looking through the iron sights and the barrel. But believe it or not, the Army doesn't teach it that way. I'm not a sniper. I didn't go to sniper school. I'm not going to tell you what advanced shooters do. I got to turn. But either way, whatever it takes. Now, what position do you want to zero your rifle in? The best answer, honestly, it's the prone position. I mean, it's the most relaxing to your body. To me, the hardest position to shoot in, and because I got bad knees and I got a bad back now, is the kneeling position. When I used to shoot in the kneeling position to qualify, I find myself having the rifle out in front of me and not drilled into my shoulder like it's supposed to be. And then I wonder why I'm not hitting shit and get frustrated because I forgot my fundamentals. You can never forget your mental. Okay, fun, the mental. But it's all mental game and it's fun. Fundamentals. Oh. Anyway. If you're watching this video and you have a secret about zeroing iron sights or something and I didn't go over, leave a comment for those folks on YouTube. And I'll read your comments and respond. Now, there's different drills that you can do to improve your aim, but the actual having the bullet go where you aim it when you're zeroing it, that's just something you actually have to do. I've never had my scopes or my iron sights zeroed by somebody else. That to me takes the fun out of having that frustration of where the hell does bullet go? Versus, okay, now I'm getting it. Now I'm getting it. It's getting tight. It's getting tight. It's getting tighter. I'm getting it. Last weekend, when I was shooting my 22, well, I had both 22s. Even with certain ammo, my M&P, Smith & Wesson M&P 22, I got some pretty tight shot groups, surprisingly, with some pretty good ammo. Another variable that you have to look at, now you have to control everything that you can. There's certain things you can't control. The other variable is shooting the same type of ammo, the same make, the same caliber, the same bullet. And when you zero, you shoot the same ammo that you want to shoot with, whatever you're doing. If you're qualifying with your rifle, if you're hunting, if you're, shit hits the fan kind of stuff. But you want to keep that same ammo because every ammo acts differently. They use different types of gunpowder, use different amounts of gunpowder. There's obviously different types of bullets that they use. And the other factor that you can control is if you're shooting suppressed or not suppressed. If you're going to shoot suppressed, zero suppressed. I've noticed it does make a difference when you shoot suppressed versus unsuppressed. Okay. When I'm shooting suppressed, the bullets are a little bit lower for some reason. Unsuppressed are a little bit higher. I don't know if it's because I have something at the end of my scope or my rifle, and it's weighing it down a little bit, but that rifle scope suppressor is not that heavy, with the exception being my 50 cal. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're talking about zeroing in a rifle. And when I say rifle, 99% of the time, I'm referring to an AR-15, or sometimes I spew out M16 because that's how I grew up knowing it. The other variables to zeroing a rifle is the shit you did the day before. It's like any other competition. You want to get a good night's sleep, want to have some food in your belly, make sure your bladder's empty, make sure your colon is empty. You want to have just enough hydration, enough caffeine just to get you going. Here's a little trick, folks. For anxiety, I've been prescribed Metropolol for my PTSD. I don't like taking anything that's like Xanax. I don't want any of those things. Nor do I like to prescribe them to patients. But a beta blocker, if you're prescribed a beta blocker, be sure to take it that morning. Because that beta blocker slows down your heart rate a little bit and relaxes you. Did you know that we prescribe beta blockers for migraine headaches, for Panadol? Well, not we, I do. So anyway, I'm taking a beta blocker every day now anyway. I take it at night. So in the morning, I am pretty chilled. I take it at night because that's the time that works best for me. Yeah. Now let's talk a little about iron sights. Let's finish up about the iron sights. You want to make sure, now, on an M16, they're mounted permanently on the rifle. You're not going to be able to dismount them or take them off or move them around. But on an M4 AR style rifle, civilian's marksman's rifle, you can move those iron sights around. So you want to make sure they're secure. You don't want them wibbly wobbly, okay? You want to tighten them down. That's why you do an inspection every time you get a rifle. Make sure they're tied down. You have the wrench to tighten them down. Make sure they're working. Nothing worse than going to the gun range and finding out you have a piece of equipment like you brought the wrong magazines, for example. You want to pre-plan and think that out. Okay, I'm going to zero my iron sights today. What am I going to zero them on? Good question. Now, what I like to zero them on is I like that instantaneous feedback, okay? Those splat shots. I like to zero my anytime I'm zeroing something, I don't like to do it on paper because I can't see the paper that far away. I like to look through it, and I like to get those splat shots when you shoot. It goes through the paper, and then it leaves a little mark and a little brightness. That's fun. Now you can shoot zero on any. I've zeroed on, made my own targets with paper plates and some white spray paint, or some color spray paint, and then I superimpose it over another. There's ways you can make your own splash, but I just buy them. It's just simpler that way for me, because I end up spraying everything and making a big mess. Excuse me. And I buy them on Amazon. I mean, I get a couple hundred of them at a time. The worst place you can buy them from is the gun store, the auxiliary gun store that's with the gun range, because they charge you an arm and a leg for something if you're missing something. Okay, sweetheart. People sometimes just move without looking. So you want to know what you're shooting at when you're training, okay? And then, of course, you want to document. You want to write down what you're shooting and what the settings are on that iron sight. And here's a challenge that you should do. Get that zero great, okay? Document it on your dope data of previously engaged targets, okay? Dope. Then mess up the iron sights as far as the apertures. Shoot it again, see what happens, and then dial back in the aperture of what your setting was to see how it's. If that can happen and it's repeatable, and you get back to that good zero, then you know that you're zeroed properly. There's no other way to do it, folks. You know, it's like doing a science experiment. If you can repeat the process and you get the same result, still going from chaos to calmness, then you know that you're good. Thing about zeroing an iron sight. Anyone? So now we're going to bring it up a notch, okay? We're going to talk about scopes. Now, the way I like to zero a scope is first, I need you to understand something, folks. I never shot a scope in the military. We didn't have scopes for anyone other than snipers or long-range shooters. It was all iron sight. And the most we had when I was in were the ACOGs, and they aren't really scopes. They're just electronic digital sights, as far as I'm concerned. I was never a big fan of the ACOGs anyway. That's just my opinion. But I don't even own one. They're still, because they had a government contract, there's still thousands of dollars. I'm talking about your $200, $300, $400 scope. Okay, your 1 to 10 variable or your fixed scope, whatever it is that you like. Now, one, you have to have a scope that you like. You have to like to look through it. When you look through it, it has to be pleasing to your eye. You really need to look through it and look at the reticules and make sure that the reticules contrast with what you're shooting at. The problem I'm running into now as I get older is my vision is not as sharp as it was when I was younger. And these reticules now are too thin for me to objectively see. That being said, these were second focal point scopes where the reticule's the same size. I used to be a big advocate for just second focal point until I realized this issue that I'm having. When you shoot first focal point, listen up, folks, this is important. The reticule gets larger as you zoom in, and it gets smaller as you zoom out. But the great thing is, you get to shoot what you want. Some other key points about scopes. Don't skimp out. Do not skimp out on the scope mount. Get a great, quick detach, rather expensive scope mount. The technology's there now that these quick detach ones they're mounted, they're great. You don't have to spend 5-10 minutes screwing it in, screwing it out. You just put it on, tighten it down, lock it in. We'll get into that in a minute. I'm not going to go over how to operate your scope. Okay, but you got to make sure the scope is mounted, it's level, and everything's functional on the scope. So you need a good quality scope. You need a even better quality mount for that scope. I've never been at this intersection this long. Anyway, having said all that, which is important, I'm going to have a sip of my coffee here. You need to take your scope, you take your rifle, you need to take the upper out of the rifle and just look through the barrel, have it on a solid object, aim the barrel at an object, okay? And make sure it's fixed on that object. Come back and make sure it's still aimed at that object. Obviously, it's got to be a non-moving object. And then what you do is you're going to get your scope and you're going to dial your scope to match what's on the object through the barrel. And here's the thing, folks. When you're doing this, you go the opposite way of what you would traditionally do when you're shooting. So if you're high, you're going to go down. If you're left, you're going to go right. Just to get it lined up properly. Now I have a tripod that I can tighten things down on. And that's how I do it in a standing position to get my sights scope zeroed. Then I step away for a minute. I come back. I take a look again. Make sure I'm not missing something. And you want to get it zeroed into the exact middle of what you're seeing in your barrel. And you want to step away again for a minute, okay, just to see if there's any fluctuation. You come back, you take a look at it again, do it 3 times. And then at least you have it zeroed. You're not shooting it when you do this. It's just mechanically zeroing it, I guess you could call it. I don't know if that's the right word. You're zeroing it, looking through the barrel. What's the scope going to see? You want to record that setting. Take a picture of it. Write it down in your dope book. Write the distance, set it zeroed at. And there's a good skill for you to have, practice. Use that scope to calculate the distance of that object that you're looking at. So all you need, the only variable that you need to make that calculation is what the size of the object is. And there's the equation that you can use it. Okay. So once that's done, and every other possible variable has been accounted for, okay? Just like with the iron sights. Same ammo, so forth, so on. But there's more variables with a scope, because you've got to make sure that scope is level. It doesn't take much to get a leveler. Some scopes actually have their own leveler and they charge you a ton for it. I don't want all that furniture on my scope. So just get a small leveler and put it on your scope and see if it's leveled with the earth. And if that's leveled, that's great. And nothing's going to be 100% perfect, but we're talking 90% perfect here. That makes sense. And the same thing applies when you're zeroing it on the mount on your tripod. You got to make sure that that's mounted properly and leveled at the same time. Because if you start out with it being shot at an angle and zeroing it at an angle, and then you put it back on the rifle, what you zeroed is going to be different than what you shoot. Because you don't shoot at an angle, you shoot straight. So you got to have that straight every single time. Then take it out and you zero it. Go to the gun range. Now, what distance do you want to zero? 100 yards. If you've done everything that I discussed, you should have no problem hitting paper at 100 yards. And from there, you can refine it even further. When I zero, I go between 3 and 5 rounds, okay? And it's a very deliberate, relaxed environment. And this is when I zero on the bench, okay? I zero on the bench, or I'll zero in the prone position. Or I'll zero using my tripod. But it's my eye looking through the scope, looking at the target, squeezing the trigger, doing the deep breathing and doing the squeeze. And don't pull on the trigger. Squeeze on it. Like that, you know? You don't want to do anything to move the rifle. So after you 5 rounds, 3 sets of zeros, adjusting it after each one, you get it fine-tuned. Guess what you're going to do? Then you're going to take a break. Take a breather. Not take a smoke. Don't smoke. Smoking's bad for you, okay? Then you're going to go back and you're going to take that mount, the scope and the mount off. You take it off for a minute. Why? Because you want to make sure you've got a good zero that is repeatable. So take the mount and the scope off. If you're shooting in one position, put the mount and the scope back on in the same place on your rifle. And see how you zero in that position, if there's much difference. Five rounds, 2 or 3 sets. Make adjustments after your first set. Get it fine-tuned. You're just getting it fine-tuned at different angles, basically. Try zeroing it in a kneeling position. Or, in my case, I will zero it standing. I'll zero it on the bench. Or I'll zero it just sitting. And when I zero it sitting, I have something to help hold it up besides just my hand. Because you want to have that hand in the, you want to have that hand that hand at a point in your body to hold it in place. And that's when you wrap out that, when you're shooting it like that, you still want to have that sling wrapped around so you can hold it tight and make sure it's still the hell in there. All those positions, you want to make sure it's mounted in your shoulder when you shoot it. Same thing applies. So folks, that's how I would tell you to zero a scope. And then after you get that fine tuned, take a picture of it. Hell, we've all got phones now that take pictures. And document what that zero is at 100 yards. And so from there, in theory, you can use your equations to calculate what your minute of angle, or how much you need to raise up your scope to shoot at further distances. Because as you shoot the bullet, the way it goes like that, and then it starts to go down. Every bullet's different. So I don't use a chronograph to calculate my speed, but you can calculate the speed, the grain of the bullet. There's some pretty fancy drift and elevation equations that are available to help. So how much are you going to raise up the scope to shoot at 200 yards? How much for 300, for 400, and then for F16, A4, or A whatever, realistically, you shouldn't be shooting it over 500 yards. It wasn't meant to be shot over 500. I don't care what anybody says. An M4 AR style rifle. Now, I know people do it. And I'm only talking about the 5.56 round, folks. I'm not talking about like the 224 Valkyrie, which can hit 1,000 yards. I'm talking the 5.56/223, 500 yards. So if you could write down that dope information at 25-yard increments each time to see what your setting should be. And you have to look at your scope and understand what the numbers mean on the bottom and play with that before you shoot it. And here's the repeating process, folks. Get your scope and reset the settings on the adjustment where you can adjust elevation and windage. Reset it to its base, which basically is on the bottom where there's no more movement. And then you're going to see what happens when you shoot it. See the difference in when you shoot it. So you're going to go all the way down and all the way to the right, all the way when it's in. That's your base. See what happens when you shoot. See where it's at. Then go back to what your settings are for your scope and shoot it again at 100 yards and see what happens. Now, if you want to do this repeatedly, each 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 yards, you can. But know that that is for that exact rifle, that exact scope, that exact quality mount, not some cheap piece of shit. And to me, the best mounts are the ones that are quick detach, because you can practice this repeatability a lot easier. Repeatability improves success. And then I would say, at that point, you truly have your AR 223556 zeroed. And it's a wonder why I get exhausted after the end of the day zeroing. And when I think I'm going to zero 2 rifles or 3 rifles at a time, and my eyes are twitching. Anything else you're not doing your firearm, you're not respecting your firearm, doing anything else. Yeah, okay, I get it. If you have the money to blow, you're just going to blow ammo. But I don't have that kind of money. There's different experiments you can do, folks. That's my recommendations. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. Someone comment about what you do differently to zero your scopes. Now, what type of scope that you get, that's up to you. I'm thinking now that I just want to get a fixed 10x scope with a good size reticule from now on for my base for my rifle. And here's the other thing that I'm thinking, folks. If I do that, I can switch them out on all my AR-15s. There's a couple of exceptions. My close quarter combat one doesn't really need a scope on it. But for everything else, yeah. I'm not a tool guy. My next subject I want to talk about is some tools. And I'm not talking tools like pew-pew tools. I'm talking ring, or zip kind of tools. I was 54 years old when I first bought an angle grinder. I'm not a tool man. I don't really fix shit. And I thought to myself, you know what, as a prepper, I'm going to need some backup tools to have in case I need them in an emergency. Didn't realize how marvelous and magnificent having an angle grinder is to do things. I've never used one before. Before, when I was putting out my chicken wire to cut it, I was using wire cutters to cut it, cutting my fingers doing the same thing. When I bought my angle grinder back in earlier this year, decided to use it when I was going to repurpose some chicken wire. I used the metal angle grinder, just cut right through that chicken wire. It would take 15 minutes, took 30 seconds. It's a relief. So now, I think the angle grinder that I have is battery operated. It comes with 2 batteries. I've already bought some extra different grinders. The 2 types of grinders that I bought, or the discs that I bought outside, what it came with. It's one, I wanted one to cut wood. Okay. And 2, I wanted one to sharpen knives as a sharpener. I have this particular thought in process, okay? 1, because I like to keep things sharp. And 2, if I'm going to have a tool, I want to maximize the use out of it. That's my thoughts. I never realized. So it's cool as a prepper to have all the cool tools and equipment, but if you don't use any of them, 1, you don't know if they work. 2, you don't know how they sync with your body. And 3, you're just wasting money if you're not going to get something and use it. So I bought some electric tools this year, battery operated. And here's the great thing, folks. With my portable solar systems, I can recharge these electric tools to reuse them. I don't need a 2,000-watt inverter, although I have one I haven't put together yet. That's just a process. But this simple 300-watt portable solar generator with a 60-watt panel will recharge the batteries for my angle grinder. Now, I know there's limitations on the angle grinder. Yeah, you can trim tree limbs with it, but you can only go as far as your hand can reach. So I understand the limitations, but it's still out there. And they have these accessories now that you can turn your angle grinder into a flat surface and make it into one of those cutters. And you can set it at different angles. I don't have that yet. I thought of getting it. And then I would mount it on a permanent fixture and just have it available. And you can cut wood or whatever you're cutting at different angles. I went 54 years without my life having an angle grinder. Apparently my father never had one when I was growing up. I never remember seeing one. We had an old-fashioned saw that we would cut everything with. And believe me, I know, because when we were doing projects, I was the handyman. And it'd be lucky if he let me cut with the saw, but usually I was the guy holding the shit. I was like, there's got to be a simpler way to do this. I remember us doing every year, we'd be doing some project, and all the sawdust that would accumulate. And I was basically the handyman's helper. But I learned a couple things. So we're going to cut it off. This is Suburban Prepper. Wishing everybody a blessed day. Be safe.